Welcome to the Crystal Fideli podcast. I am your host, Crystal Fideli. I am a social researcher and policy analyst, speaker, consultant, and an award-winning nonprofit founder and executive director. And all of my work focuses on helping us to understand coercive control, helping organizations to understand coercive control so they can respond better, and helping individuals understand coercive control so they can navigate the systems that they need to navigate better. And here on the Crystal Fideli podcast at large, we examine when institutional norms and practices diverge from what the research calls an evidence-based approach, being based on science, research, the law, etc., and instead reverts into using what the research calls a practice-based approach based on tradition and opinion, and how it causes an immense amount of harm to very vulnerable and marginalized people. And that leads me into introducing you to a special series we are doing here on the Crystal Fideli podcast called When Coercive Control Turns Financial, the Family Court Response and the Cascading Consequences. We see in the research and in practice time and time again when a woman attempts to set boundaries on the coercive control that she is experiencing, how the coercive control does not stop, because that's not how it works. Coercive control does not stop when a woman sets boundaries. It just switches forms and it intensifies until a person in power or an institution steps in and stops it. So she attempts to set boundaries, and most often it switches to financial. And we examine the family court's response and how that leads to so many cascading consequences. So welcome to this. So today I am joined by my guest, who we are going to keep anonymous for her protection, who has agreed to share her lived experience navigating financial control within the family court system. So thank you so much for being here and for your willingness to have this conversation.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Yay. Okay. So let's get into the first section. So reframing domestic violence. So coercive control is the governing model. And I just realized I said yay. There's nothing yay about this, but that's just my personality shining through. But anyways, so I like to have a good time, but I forget that we're talking about very serious and hurtful stuff. And so I apologize. I didn't mean to, downplay anything. But anyways, okay. So in this next section, I want to reframe how we understand domestic violence. So traditionally, domestic violence is often understood through an incident-based model focused on isolated events and particularly physical violence. But my goal is to shift the understanding towards a model where the perpetrator, the root cause of all this is that the perpetrator seeks to have power and control over their target, and that it's an ongoing pattern of power and control and entrapment across multiple areas of a person's life. So within this framework, financial coercive control is not a secondary issue, but a central component. And when that control is not interrupted, it can persist and intensify over time. So I want to start with how this actually shows up over time. So could you talk about what you experienced in your relationship and how it went beyond just isolated incidents and how it functioned as a pattern in your relationship?
Oh, absolutely. So when I first met my ex, we both were working, and like I always believed in kind of like taking turns and sharing the roles in finances, and that kind of was where I was. I was pregnant with my son and ended up losing my contract at the facility that we were both working at, and trying to find a job while visibly pregnant was difficult. Um, and it started pretty quickly after I lost my job. I was stressing out about how I was going to get diapers and how I was going to take care of the baby, and I didn't really have any like clothes and things of that nature. Um, and I had no income. So it kind of started pretty quick. And once my son was 4 months old, I went back to work, and then COVID hit and shut down all of the daycares. And I ended up getting pregnant with my daughter. And my ex said, quit your job. I'll give you a credit card. You don't have to worry about it. Anything that you would have purchased yourself, you can use the card if it was something that you would have to save for, just have a conversation with me about it. So I agreed to quit my job, and within a week of me having that credit card, he took it away from me for the first time.
So financial control for you was boom right at the outset.
Right away. Yeah. I mean, like the financial control, I wasn't allowed to have keys to the house. I wasn't allowed to be on the lease. I was pregnant with our daughter and received an email from him trying to evict me from the home.
Were you guys still together at this time?
Yes. 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 Oh, yes. But, he's had his father is a millionaire, and he has had daddy to clean up his messes throughout his entire life. He's never had to face anything for anything, and he just thinks, who the hell he is.
He's
And this is what he
entitled.
watched his father do to his mother. Yes.
He's
He
entitled.
watched his father do this to his mother, and this just is what he thinks life is. But yeah, I mean, like I wasn't allowed to have my own separate keys to the car. I was not allowed to have keys to the house.
So another piece of coercive control, it's not static. So it can shift depending on the situation, especially when something changes or when there's resistance. So can you share how the control changed or showed up in different ways over time? So we're talking about financials, we're talking about whether you can have a own key to your own house or not. Now, was it physical? Was it psychological? Was it inside the relationship before you guys split?
So when we first met, he was like this great guy, loved my friends, like we were all always doing things together. When we moved in together, it was literally that day. Like all of a sudden my friends weren't good for me anymore. They weren't allowed to come hang out. He didn't
Sure.
want to go hang out with them. Um there was a lot of sexual abuse. He kind of had the idea that if he was going to be with one person for the rest of his life, he owned that person's body. Um, I was prescribed heavy duty sleeping medications, and I would wake up in the middle of the night to him doing whatever he wanted to do. Isolated me from my family. Like would would control my car. So if I had plans to go home and see my family who lived 2.5 hours away, and he didn't like something I did or something I said, he would take the keys away from me, causing like kind of a rift between me and my family because I was always making plans and then never able to follow through with them. Um, it was in every way that you could possibly imagine, being abused to where nobody on the outside would see it. It took me a while to realize that I was actually like being abused with the coercive control.
So I also want to focus. So definitely see coercive control operating through multiple different domains. So I also want to focus specifically on the financial side of this because it's often minimized but can be central to maintaining control. So I know you've touched upon it a little bit, but can you talk about the role that the financial control played in your experience and how it affected your ability to support yourself and just like navigate the system? We're going to get into system entry in just a minute, but just overall and as you were
Oh,
entering and then get into how as you were entering the family court system, but really before that and then as you were entering the system. Does that make sense?
yeah.
Okay.
So like if I needed shampoo or conditioner and I went to the store and got it, like he wanted to see the receipt. And then if he felt like what I paid for the product was too much, like why would you spend that much on shampoo? Like I would have a spending limit. I remember one year for Christmas to get all of the nieces and nephews Christmas gifts, he gave me a budget of $150. And then because I went over that budget, because there were six nieces and nephews, and they were his nieces and nephews, not mine, his, I went over that budget. He took my credit card away. If I wasn't allowed to purchase things online. I and if I did, if I used the credit card for anything online, he would physically take the card away from me. So He would leave. He left me and the kids home for 10 days with no access to a vehicle, no access to money. He did go grocery shopping prior to him leaving. My son fell and got a concussion, and I had to like figure out a way that I could get him to the hospital because I didn't have a vehicle. Another time he left us. Again, he did leave me the vehicle, but told me I wasn't allowed to drive it. My kids had to go to school, so I drove them to school, and then I ran out of gas, and he refused to turn my credit card on so that I could get gas because he told me I wasn't allowed to drive the car in the first place.
This guy, man, what the, wow, this guy. Okay. All right, so let's get into system and I'm so sorry. I am so sorry that you experienced this, especially as a
Oh, that's
young
fine.
mother, like sorry, a mother of young children. This is
Hmm.
disgusting.
Hmm.
What a vulnerable time in your life too. And to, well, I guess this is why he did it. And this is why we're bringing
Yep.
awareness because this is ridiculous. You were 2026.
Hmm.
Well, I know it wasn't 2026 back then, but you know what I mean? Like 2020, whatever, America, like you're a woman in America. This is ridiculous.
Yep.
All right, so system entry, procedural demands versus constrained capacity. So now I want to shift into what happens at the point of entering the system. So individuals experiencing financial coercive control often enter the family court system already under significant financial and psychological strain. So at the same time, the system operates with expectations that assume access to resources, stability, and capacity. This creates a mismatch where the ability to participate effectively depends on conditions that may already be absent because of coercive control. So, I want to start with what things looked like for you at the time you entered the system. Can you describe what your circumstances were like when you entered the family court process financially?
So at that point, I was not working. I had not been allowed to work for about 3 years. Up at that point, I was living in a domestic violence shelter. That when they served me with my custody papers, the sheriff was like, "I'm so sorry to have to do this to you." And he had a big wig attorney. And unfortunately, part of, you know, the abuse that I endured, I have PTSD, and the
Yeah.
huge, contributing factor to our demise. I lost it. He locked me out of the house, took my kids. I broke into the home through a window because I didn't have keys, and I cut myself, and I used my blood, and I wrote the word rapist on the wall. And because I did that, and because I admitted to it, they put me on supervised visitation immediately. And
But
he
they don't put him on supervised
right,
visitation for the torment and the torture he
nobody
put you through. I mean, was that your
exactly
shining moment? No, but if you hold
right,
somebody underwater, they're going to be gasping for air and trying to get to the surface, and that's what
right,
you were doing. That is
reactive.
reactive. Well, I don't even know
Yep.
if it's abuse, but I guess, but you know what I mean. It's just like
Yeah.
it's a trauma response, is what it
And
is.
that, yes. So I mean, like, I already had nothing, and then this
You
man
were in
is
a
a
domestic
millionaire.
violence shelter while he's
Yep.
comfortably in the home when you're the
He and
victim and he's the perpetrator.
on top of that, he is making $11,000 a month,
Mhm.
and I finally get a job making $17 an hour, and he sues me for child support. And I'm ordered to pay $1,800 a month in child support because one of the children that he has custody of is not biologically his. So I was required to pay 100% of his care. I almost lost my apartment. And this man is making 11 grand a month, and is like the same domestic violence bonus program that helped me get my apartment when I first left him. Um, what also gave me emergency funding because I had an eviction served against me. I mean, he has 8 attorneys on his roster, and I have won the trial, I've won the appeal, I've won motions to stay, I've won increase in child support, and it's just me. I'm doing it on my
Pro
own.
se. Yeah.
Yep. um
Good.
So it, like it started out not good. And then I was only able to afford to see my kids through a supervision center 3 hours every other week because I was paying so much money in child support. Then the supervision fees was like $67 an hour. Um, my rent was $1,300 a month. I mean, I was barely making it. Um, I found an attorney who was willing to work with me on payments. Come to find out, she wasn't really an actual child custody attorney. She did like wills and probate, so she had no idea what she was doing and almost cost me my kids. So 3 days before trial, I
Well, yeah,
fired
that's
her.
that's another thing about, when you're in this situation, like he gets the pickings from all the
Yep,
attorneys because he has all the money because he took it
yep,
all, right?
yep.
And prevented you from working. And then you get, how do I say this professionally? Hold on. Um, I mean, you get not the quality attorneys if you can even get one because
Right,
you're
right.
constrained financially. This is what I want to highlight from what you're saying is that because oftentimes what I will run into is that judges and attorneys will be faulting the target for not working, right? And it's just like
Hmm.
you have no idea what went on inside of that relationship. Like you have no idea if she literally was not allowed to work. And
When
yeah.
I was working, he would take the car keys from me so frequently, causing me to be late to work or missing like work altogether that I got written up for being late so many times. Like he was going to cause me to lose my job.
Yeah, it's like judges and attorneys, you have no idea what goes on in these
Mm-mm.
relationships where there's coercive control and financial coercive control. I want to start with what things looked like for you at the time you entered the system. Okay, we talked about what it looked like financially. Do you want to just touch upon like emotionally? I know that you seem like a fighter like me, but emotionally, what was going on for you when you entered the family court system?
Oh, I was distraught. Those kids were everything. They were the only thing that was, keeping me going. I was living my life in a completely disassociated state. I was waking up every day wanting the day to be over. Um, my kids were it. They were everything.
Yeah.
So he takes my children, he takes my home. I'm living in a domestic violence shelter. The only way I can see my kids is if I agree to go to his house and sleep with him. And so I was a mess, and I was making stupid mistakes. Like I'm currently, he's pressing charges against me for harassment. So like I'm waiting to go to. In the meantime, I can't press charges against him for rape because nobody saw him doing it to me in the middle of the night, and there's not enough evidence for them to get into his phone to see where I said that he would take videos and pictures of me completely asleep doing whatever he wanted to do. I can't press charges on him for that, but I have to go to trial for harassment charges. That is now stopping me from even being able to chaperone my daughter's field trips.
I'm
So
so
I was a
sorry.
mess. I was a mess. I had to have a psychological evaluation. The evaluator, my whole evaluation was, how I had changed and I had flourished since leaving the relationship. Then at the end of the evaluation, she puts, because of my emotional dysregulation when dealing with my ex, that I was a risk of harm to my children.
No, you were not a
Yep.
risk of harm. He's the
Nope.
risk of harm. I am so sorry. Oh my
Yep.
gosh. This
Yep.
is all right. So the system also expects people to understand the process, advocate for themselves, and present things clearly. So, what was it like trying to meet those expectations given what you were dealing with at the time? First of all, did you have representation?
So I had representation for about 2 months. And then when the evaluator came back and said that I was a risk of harm, my quote unquote attorney was like, you need to sign this parenting plan that took my children away completely. She was like, the judge is going to take your rights away altogether. all their evidence that they have against you, and this is all going to be public, and I would really take the deal, and then we can revisit in 6 months. And I was like, absolutely not. I said, I have not, because so our first judge, I was put on supervised visitation pending the self-harm evaluation. Our first judge forced me to sign that interim order as a final order and threatened me and said that if I didn't sign the interim order as a final order, trial was not going to go well for me. So I had to sign the final order. I did not have an attorney. I didn't know what I was doing. So I signed the final order, putting me on supervised visitation. He then files to move my children 2.5 hours away. I filed contesting his relocation, and for a week between when I contested his relocation, he told me he's like, you're running out of time. You can pull back, don't contest it. Let us move. Otherwise, I'm going to make sure that you never see the kids again. 8 days to the day that I filed contesting his move, he filed a special relief accusing me of having sex in a public park in front of my children. He claims that my 4-year-old son went home and told him that a man gave mommy $100 bill. Mommy put it on the floor, went behind a tree, pulled my pants down, let the man touch my butt, pulled my pants back up, and put the $100 bill in my pocket. They file that motion. They tell me that there's no hearing, that it's just paperwork that they're filing. The following week, there's a hearing. He wins his motion for special relief because they told me that there was no hearing. And I had no idea what the hell was happening, because I have no idea what is happening as far as legal stuff goes. So he gets the special relief, and we are scheduled to go to trial with the same judge that told me if I made it go to trial, it wasn't going to go well for me. 2 weeks before pretrial, that same judge is removed from the bench, and is under federal indictment for
Good. I
like
mean,
witness
the way that
tampering
he
and
tried
a
to, or
whole.
she tried to coerce you, it sounds like there were other issues going on with that judge.
Well, listen. So he's removed from the bench. We get a new judge. New judge is a female. I finally get my day in court, and that day that I finished representing, my side, she immediately took me off supervision. She told them, she said, you failed to prove that she should have ever been on supervision at all. You stopped her from being an effective mother for what? You kept her out of these kids' lives for what?
Yes.
And then, so she gave me 50-50 custody, and then issued her final order 33 days later, giving me primary custody of both kids. And then, he appealed, and at the end of our trial, I had the bailiffs and the sheriffs coming up to me, and the bailiff was like, without saying too much, I want you to know the judge was very impressed by you. She was absolutely blown away. You should become an attorney. I had all the sheriffs at the end, you should be a lawyer. I don't know how you did that, and you held yourself so well. And so now,
well, we could talk about that. We could talk about that because, who knows, maybe you can be an attorney for You Made a Way. I mean, we're taking over the entire country.
You go to these domestic violence shelters, and they say, oh, we can offer you an attorney. We can offer you this. We can offer you. No, they don't. They don't offer. There's nothing.
So, I mean, it sounds like everything turned out great for you, and I'm so happy. And for a lot of women, it doesn't end up like that. It just seems like, kind of throwing out spaghetti at the wall. It just so happened that that judge, was being brought up on, whatever, and was removed, and you got a better judge. But it's just, that was a by chance. You know what I mean? What if that
absolutely.
Happen? And so it sounds like you didn't really, know the expectations, and you really didn't have the funds to hire legal counsel. And so you weren't able to really understand the expectations. It's just kind of by chance that you were able to somehow make it through, and things were able to make it right. And so I'm so glad for that. Now, how someone presents themselves in that environment can shape how they're perceived. So did you feel that the way you were experiencing stress or pressure affected how you were seen or understood in the family court process, especially before you got that better judge?
Oh, absolutely. And because with all of that, you're seen as unstable.
Yes.
You're seen as crazy.
Yes.
They don't understand that that is a product of what you're living every single day.
It's
You
like,
know,
I always
like
tell
that is
people,
not.
it's like shoving dust up somebody's nose and wondering why they're sneezing. Well, if you put somebody under intense power and control, they're going to have a trauma response. And especially if, the power and control is manifesting over whether you get legal representation and can afford basic necessities like housing and foods, etc., they're going to have immense trauma response. And then you wonder why, and you see them as unstable. No, that's a trauma response of being controlled,
Mhm.
and specifically financially controlled. Go ahead.
Yep. And so like that's exactly what it was. People are looking at me like I am absolutely insane. And I looked crazy. My text messages looked
You
crazy,
look
like,
traumatized, is what you looked like.
right.
Not crazy. You
He
look
would push me and
traumatized. Yeah.
push me and push me and then shove a camera in my face. And the day, when I'm sitting there in trial, like I did not object to anything. I let them put everything into evidence. And I sat there and I watched videos of myself and I had my words read back to me. And I'm just sitting there and it's like, yes, this all looks
Yeah.
awful without context. But let me give you like the context. Let me lead you up into what brought me here. And that is exactly what I thankfully was able to do with the judge. Like, yes, I look that shit crazy. But it also, the evaluator said that I was a risk of harm to the kids. And the judge asked her, she said, is her CPTSD diagnosis a result of the relationship? And the evaluator said, I can't pinpoint it to one thing, but I can say if all of that abuse did occur, yes, like her PTSD would largely be due to the relationship with him. And
Good
I
for
think that was
her.
all the judge really needed to
Good for
hear
her.
was for her to be like, oh wait, and she even asked the evaluator, she said, so you want me to fault her for her emotional dysregulation when it
Good
comes
for
to dealing with the
her.
man that abused her? And that,
Good for
yeah.
her.
So
Yeah.
I did get very, very, very lucky. And then 3 months to the day after my trial finished, the initial judge that was removed from the bench was reinstated back to the bench and cleared of any wrongdoing.
Please tell me they put him in traffic court or something and
No,
not.
he's still in family court.
Okay.
Uh-huh. He's still in family court, still ruining lives.
All right, so let's get into procedural outcomes and cascading consequences. So, in this final section, I want to focus on what happens over time. So, when financial coercive control is not interrupted, those initial conditions don't stay temporary. They often become the foundation for longer term and compounding consequences that affect both legal outcomes and broader life circumstances. So, I want to start with those early conditions. So, what were some of the immediate challenges you faced early on, and how did those begin to affect things over time? I mean, I think we really, covered that, just the intense abuse through multiple different levers. Like, it really affected how you presented, it affected your housing stability, it affected your litigation, immense disadvantage compared to his immense advantage. Is there anything, and it affected your because here's the thing, it's like when we see financial coercive control, like the court system just treats it as, oh well, that sucks, we'll get to that, in a little bit when we get to it. It's temporary, it's short term, which by the way is completely unacceptable for only one party to be experiencing it sucks, it's temporary short term harm. Like, no, it needs to be both parties. Okay, if we're going to do that. Or here's a novel thought, let's make sure neither party experiences it. But then what I'm saying is that no, this is an indication that this individual is a perpetrator of power and control, and that this is the target. And so what's that's an indication of is that there was and or is going to be power and control exercised physically, psychologically, through litigation, through custody, co-parenting, financial, etc. And it's not going to get better over time. In fact, if you don't interrupt it, it is going to get worse. And coercive control does not end until the target's life ends. And I don't mean to say that to scare you. Listen, this is on a spectrum, but I'm just saying, like, the system needs to understand how dangerous this stuff is. It's not oh, this
Yes.
stinks when you see a woman being financially abused. No, that's an indication that she's in danger and those children are in danger. So,
Yes.
is there anything that you want to say about, and it's okay if you don't, if you feel like we did cover it all, but how how things just like affected over time, like were there any other cascading consequences, or did we pretty much like cover it?
Well, I mean, honestly, like the fallout my kids are dealing with because of that, the abuse went from
Yeah,
me to the kids, and
yeah,
the alienation that they went through. I mean, like
yeah,
my son is 6, and he's so confused with, he knows he loves me, but for
yeah.
2 years he was told that I didn't love him. I was a bad mom. It was my fault that, um I would be there at night, promising them that I would be there in the morning. And then I would be kicked out of the house because I wouldn't agree to sleep with my ex. And he would kick me out. And then the next morning, my kids would wake up and I wouldn't be there. And my ex would tell them, oh, mommy just decided she didn't want to be here. You know, there's a lot of fallout that I'm dealing with now with my kids. He's stopping my daughter from going into therapy. He's trying to stop her from attending a better school next year. Um,
He's still
it
exercising power and control, and those kids
Yes,
are
yes,
still affected by the short-term harm,
yes,
because short-term
yes,
harm becomes long-term irreparable
yes,
harm, whether they
yes,
prove that factually through court proceeding or not. Like whether a target, which are the women and children, have the finances to actually have that proven in a court or not, doesn't make it any less true just because it wasn't actually factually found in court. Okay, so then when that control is not interrupted, it often doesn't stay contained in one area. Did you see it extend into other areas of your life over time? If so, how? I think we pretty much covered that. I mean, it extended into
yeah,
multiple different areas, but is there anything
yeah. I
else you
mean,
wanted to say
work.
about that?
No, just like work, family, like I really was a shell of a person. Like I developed such severe social anxiety where like I couldn't even handle going out in public anymore. The
Yeah.
idea of going into like big, because I was such a recluse, like it was me and my kids and our 4 walls. Like all I could do with them was go out and walks or take them
Yeah.
outside. And so like I really did, I developed such a severe social anxiety. um I now, like one of my biggest triggers is always feeling like I'm doing something wrong now, like where I just feel like nothing I do is enough. It's just not the right, it's just not enough because of everything that like just, it really does, man. It affects you in ways that like you just don't really understand until like you're in the middle of it.
Yeah. Yeah. This is so true. Thank you for highlighting that, because I totally resonate with that personally, because I have gone through this myself and people don't understand just how it debilitates you. So,
Yep.
all right. So over time, those early conditions can shape longer term outcomes. So looking back, how have those early experiences impacted your situation over the longer term? I mean, again, we probably like have, answered this. Sometimes that's how these interviews go. Like we answer all the questions in sections 1 and 2, and then by the time we get to section 3, it's kind of like I'm just saying, is there anything else you want to add to this? I think we pretty much answered it, but is there anything else you want to add to that?
um I do feel like we probably went um over most of that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So before we close, I just want to ask a few final questions about what you want people in positions of power and others living through similar experiences to understand. So, I know you're going to have fun with this question, or not fun, but this is going to be your moment to really speak to the judges, the lawyers, the policymakers, or other people who are in positions of power, who have the power to make change, right? And so, what would you want judges, lawyers, policymakers, other people in positions of power to better understand about financial coercive control and its effects?
Just that like if you're seeing something like that, if you have something in your courtroom where it appears that this is a stay-at-home mom that now all of a sudden, they're filing for divorce and he's filing for full custody of the kids, take a deeper look and listen, to them, because we are not always these emotional, like these listen to us. I know that not all of us have the ability to kind of like really pull it together in those moments, and we are emotional, and these are our kids. These are our babies.
Well, and you don't even
That
have
you're
basic survival necessities while he does, and you don't have a lawyer, and
correct.
he has a lawyer when you enabled the income and built the income up the entire time and are probably still
Um,
enabling it with your caretaking.
absolutely, absolutely. It
Anybody
it
would
it
be
is
that's what happens when your prefrontal cortex goes offline because of the immense amount of stress and you're in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Like a different part of your brain is literally operating. And again, it's like shoving dust up somebody's nose and wondering why people are sneezing. This is exactly what happens in these cases. You put them in trauma mode and you wonder why they're having trauma responses. So,
exactly, and that is exactly it. And to take like the courses, like I feel like every judge should have to take a course or courses or multiple courses on domestic violence and coercive control. I think that is what a benefit of my judge was that she was an assistant district attorney prosecuting
mm,
heavy for domestic
hmm.
violence. She put in my custody, like her final order, like she put, while mother's responses are unhinged, this court cannot ignore the severe psychological toll, that the abuse that she endured did to her. So that was big for the judge to see that, for her to say, this is not who this individual is as a person. This is what she had become because of what she had been through.
Yeah, no, that's really, really good. I really like that. You bring an interesting point of, just sort of like these how we select these judges. I mean, coming from the prosecutor's office, especially dealing with domestic violence. Yeah, wow. I never even thought of that. That is good. Okay, so is there anything else important we did not discuss that you think people need to understand? Or I'm sorry, what I skipped a question. What would you want to say to another person with lived experience who is going through something similar right now?
um it, don't give up. I mean, like there are definitely times where like I wanted to just say forget it. I mean, even the day of
Yeah.
trial, when we came home on lunch, I said to my sister, I said, I'm just going to tell them to forget it. Don't give up. You know your truth, you know your story, and
I don't think I would have been able to eat
just
lunch that day.
oh, I didn't. No,
Yeah.
I did not. And I like, because I was sitting there and I was listening to all of these things, and they were reading all of my text messages and these videos, and I'm like, I look unhinged, and I'm looking at it from a judge, and I'm thinking like the judge, like, this woman is not getting these kids, like, um
Well, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? And so you look like a woman who was traumatized. It depends
yeah.
on the eye of the whole beholder, and that's why we're talking about how we select these judges and sort of having them trained on identifying where there are power dynamics. Because then they would see not that you're unhinged, they would see this woman's not at her best, but it's because the root cause is she was being coercively controlled. So,
Hmm. Yep. And
um,
that's exactly it. And it um it doesn't change who you are as a parent. And I think that, says a lot too. While like I was always the best mom that I possibly could have been, and I'm still showing up and being the best mom that I can be. It doesn't define us, who
you know,
who we are as people.
it's interesting because I'm actually just thinking your behavior was used against you to take your kids from you, but yet his
Hmm.
behavior was not equally used against him to take his kids
So
from him.
listen, this is I we they filed an appeal, and we just got the appeal decision back like 3 weeks ago, or 2 weeks ago, and then they filed to re-argue in front of the Superior Court again. But the superior court because he also had to have a psychological evaluation. And his evaluator said, if my allegations of financial abuse, sexual abuse, mental abuse, all of that were accurate, they would be very scary, and it would cause his opinion of him to be a risk of harm to the children to change.
Good.
The judge put in her final opinion that that she believed and that I was able to corroborate with independent evidence, with his own testimony, that all of that abuse did occur. So now I'm going to be filing a modification and using his evaluator's words against him, because now, in a court of law, judicial findings, my allegations have proven to be true, which means he is now a risk of harm to those children.
Yeah, you need to go to law school. You're gonna be an attorney. But what I will say is this, but I just, you know what I'm saying? Like how your actions were used against you to keep the kids from you, but yet his actions, it just seems asymmetrical. I don't understand. It just doesn't line up. Like, why are we not being treated equally here?
Exactly.
I don't get it. Okay. But anyways, yeah, I really think you need to go to law school, but this is what I will say to you. If you do this, listen, take this with a grain of salt, or just completely toss it out because you didn't ask for my advice, but I am going to give it in case it's helpful. But, and anybody else who's listening, a place that I had to come to in doing this work, and even just last night, the Bible talks about forgiveness. And forgiveness does not mean, I think some people understand what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is letting go and releasing, and it's for your sake, right? And so maybe forgiveness isn't the best word. Like I would like to actually look up what the Greek word is in the Bible, because maybe it means something entirely different than we think it means. But I just got to a place where I'm like, because the Bible says, Jesus says, take my yoke upon you because my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And I was like, this work doesn't seem light. It seems very heavy. And I just felt like God was like, you need to let go. But I think we think about when we let go that we just let go and be like, okay, well, that was a chapter in my life. Now I'm going to be a accountant or whatever. I would never be an accountant. I'm not really great with numbers. I always joke, I'm like, when I earned my master's in social research and analysis and my second master's in advocacy and policy, the computer did all the computing for me. I didn't do it. So I was an English major in undergrad. No, but that's me joking. But it's like, but I don't want to let it go. I want to dedicate the rest of my life and my career towards this. And I felt like God was like, what would it look like for you to stay in the fight, but to do it from a place of releasing the pain and the injustice from your heart and your body? And so even last night, and this is something that I have to do time and time again, I literally will say to the person who subjected me to the power and control, and even the judge, I will say their names out loud and I will say, I forgive you, and I release you, and I let go. And I was like, and I'm just saying this purely out of like obedience to God. And I know it's a weird word, but just because God created me and God knows how I'm made and knows what I need to do for my best outcome for myself. And so I'm going to trust the designer, right? Because they know what they created. And so I am just purely saying this out of obedience. And, I thank you, Holy Spirit, that you are going to help me, because the Holy Spirit is called many things, and one of them is helper. And so I thank you that you are going to help me to forgive and to let go. And I just say it like out loud, like such and such, I forgive you. Such and such, I release you. Because I want to do this work from a place of power, not trauma. Right. And so I don't know if that's helpful to you at all, but that's what I have found has been really helpful to me. And I've slept better at night when I started doing that. So, well, anyways,
I appreciate that.
Yes. So thank you so much for joining me for this conversation and for being so brave to share your experience. I know it was probably hard, but it really is, going to help other women and just help this cause.
Thank you for joining us for another episode inside of our series called When Coercive Control Turns Financial, the Family Court Response, and the Cascading Consequences. If you are an organization or an event and you are looking for organizational consulting, speaking, or training so you can understand coercive control better, so you can respond better, I want to invite you to go ahead and visit me at crystalfidelli.com. If you are an individual leaving coercive control and you would like support navigating, I want to invite you to go ahead and also visit me at crystalfidelli.com. And if you are interested in specifically supporting You Made a Way, it is the 501c3 nonprofit that I founded and I am the executive director of. If you are just as passionate as we are of making a way for women and children who are leaving coercive control when it turns financial, I want to invite you to go ahead and visit us at youmadeaway.org. And we hope to see you back here next time for another episode of When Coercive Control Turns Financial, the Family Court Response, and the Cascading Consequences. See you then.